On alert, as people return to work after the Lunar New Year holiday, authorities step up disinfection. Defeated but unbowed, Taiwan's women's football team fails to qualify for the World Cup, but their campaign is not over. Controversial games, boycotts and pandemic restrictions cast a shadow on the Beijing Olympics. And we look to the stars to find out whether the year of the tiger will roar or whimper. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. On Monday, Taiwan's Central Epidemic Command Center reported 2 new local cases of COVID-19 and 47 new imported ones. It is keeping the current level 2 epidemic alert in place until the end of the month. The CCC also announced that it will lift an entry ban on migrant workers from the Philippines and Vietnam from February 15th. On Monday, as workers return from the 9-day Lunar New Year holiday, authorities are focusing on ramping up disinfection work. Louise Watt reports.
People returning to the cities after the Lunar New Year holiday. With the mass movement during this busiest time of year, authorities are trying to stop any potential spread of COVID-19. In Taipei, this means stepping up the disinfection of the city's metro stations as people go back to work.
特别针对人潮比较聚集的这几个重要的一个转运的一个交通要点，包括台北车站、南港车站以及3大的一个客运转运站的部分，进行内部及公众周围的一个加强喷消作业。
Taiwan has a number of COVID hotspots. In the port city of Kaohsiung, one of 4 cases reported on Sunday was a harbour pilot. Authorities are listing the ships he boarded to trace where he may have picked up the virus. Harbour workers are supposed to get tested regularly, but officials say this 40-something harbour pilot repeatedly ignored SMS testing reminders.
他只有经过一次的 PCR 筛检，包含在1月24号的通知，以及1月30号，还有1月29号的简讯通知。这个案都没有如期的到场检验。
The city's mayor is furious.
就传染病防治法的部分。
Following the New Year break, both Kaohsiung and the northwestern city of Taoyuan are postponing the reopening of kindergartens. In New Taipei City, the mayor is reminding people coming back to get tested if they develop any symptoms. He's also ordered companies to test their staff.
在移动过程当中，是不是有一些潜在的风险？那我们就是需要全面的戒备。所以我今天已经下令。 企业界如果能够快筛，自己快筛。我们的市政府所有的上班地点，明天一定要严格落实。
The Central Epidemic Command Center says things are under control, but it's encouraging people to remain cautious. Chris Ma and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Canada's capital, Ottawa, is under a state of emergency after anti-vaccine protests paralysed the city for a second consecutive weekend. Unrest was initially sparked by a federal vaccine mandate for truckers crossing the border with the United States, but they soon became a vehicle for expressing broader dissatisfaction with pandemic restrictions, with demonstrations now taking place in cities across the country. James Chater has this report.
Discord on the doorstep of Canada's Parliament. Cities across the country were brought to a standstill for a 10th day on Sunday by what's being dubbed Freedom Convoy 2022, a movement protesting against vaccine mandates and pandemic restrictions.
I'm here to denounce that the unvaccinated for 2 years have been shamed and thrown under the bus on the public place. It goes against freedom of speech in Canada.
Protests were originally sparked by a vaccine mandate for truckers crossing into Canada from the United States. But that quickly fed into underlying frustration with pandemic-related restrictions and the government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Local media say some within the movement are affiliated with right-wing groups. And across the border, the movement has drawn the support of several US Republicans, as well as former US President Donald Trump. Prime Minister Trudeau, currently isolating after contracting COVID, has said he's unwilling to negotiate with demonstrators. But the protesters' message has struck a chord with the Canadian public.
I support the truckers because they're standing up for freedom. Our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms has been violated in many, many ways. We're not allowed to cross the border. We're not allowed to go on planes or trains. We've been fired from jobs.
Protesters in the capital have been well resourced. Food and drink stalls have been set up, with some playing hockey on the streets. Bouncy castles have even been erected to keep children entertained. The mayor of Ottawa has imposed a state of emergency and is calling for more resources, saying that security forces are overwhelmed. Ottawa police shut down a key logistics camp for the protesters on Sunday evening, seizing fuel and canisters of gas. But with both sides refusing to back down, the standoff looks set to continue. Asnaya Joe and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
The 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing are officially underway. It's become the first games in decades to attract boycotts of any kind since the Los Angeles and Seoul Games of the 1980s. The millions of people the Olympics bring together globally mean they've always been a platform for political dissent. We take a look at some of the more controversial games. The 1936 Games in Nazi Germany were held 3 years before World War II broke out. They were the first televised Olympics, giving Hitler a global audience. In the 1976 Montreal Games, Taiwan was barred from using its official name, Republic of China, under pressure from China. Taiwan could have competed under the name Taiwan, but instead the military government pulled Taiwan out 1 day before the event. In 1979, the Nagoya Resolution directed Taiwan to compete as Chinese Taipei, a name it must use to this day. In protest, Taiwan staged a second boycott, this time of the Moscow Games in 1980. In total, 65 countries withdrew, led by the United States, over the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The 2022 Winter Olympics comes with rising concern over China's slide into authoritarianism. Still, Beijing is the first city ever given the right to host both summer and winter games. Almost 3,000 athletes from 91 countries will compete in the Games, including 4 from Taiwan. Along with the boycotts on the grounds of China's human rights record, many are staying away due to the pandemic and COVID restrictions. This report from Bing Wang.
The 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics opened with a spectacular display of lights and fireworks broadcast globally from an empty stadium. Though COVID safety measures kept people away from the opening ceremony, they came out in droves around the world to protest China's hosting of the Games and the country's poor human rights record.
チベット、南モンゴル、香港、ウイグルで大変な弾圧を受けて、毎日たくさんの方が苦しんでいる中での中国でのオリンピックは反対ですので、今日ここに来ました。
Olympic athletes and personnel are being kept away from the public to prevent the virus from spreading. Many of them have complained that the protocols are stricter than the Tokyo Summer Olympics last year. But more than 350 people, including dozens of athletes, tested positive upon entering Beijing for the sporting events. Among them, Finland ice hockey player Marko Anttila. He's been in quarantine for the last 18 days, unable to compete.
And from medical perspective, we know that a person like this is no longer infectious, no danger to the other team. And these isolation decisions are not based on medicine or science. It's more a cultural and political decision.
Athletes and journalists have lodged complaints of poor living conditions at their hotels, such as poor internet connection, bad food, and a lack of training equipment.
We feel here like we are in jail. We can't go out of hotel, police is outside, the big fence is there. I can't feel Olympic spirit. Maybe when everything starts it will be different, but I don't know, it's really, really weird.
Heightened security, strict COVID-19 protocols, and politics have dominated headlines. Now with the Games underway, China hopes the spotlight will redirect onto the performance of the athletes. Kama Xu and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
Top Chinese tennis player Peng Shuai has told a French publication she's retiring from the sport. In an interview with L'Equipe, the 36-year-old athlete is quoted as saying that multiple surgeries and her age contributed to her decision. This comes after a social media post by Peng in November accused the former Chinese Vice Premier Zhang Gaoli of sexual assault, an allegation she later denied. Peng also denies that she was held against her will by Chinese authorities. Concerns were raised when she disappeared from public view after the post. This led to an international campaign to reveal her whereabouts and calls for her safety. Over the weekend, Peng met with the Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach in Beijing. He said the sexual assault allegations were a personal matter and any investigation must be instigated by Peng. Taiwan's women's football team missed out on a chance to qualify for the FIFA World Cup next year after losing to Vietnam in its final game of the AFC Asian Cup. But as Sandy Chi reports, the team's performance has given the country plenty to cheer for.
Defeated but unbowed. On Sunday, Taiwan missed out on a chance to qualify for next year's FIFA Women's World Cup after a 2-1 loss in the final game of the 2022 Asian Cup. Vietnam opened the scoring in Mumbai with a powerful header from a corner kick, but Taiwan came roaring back as Su Yushen slotted in from a tight angle into the bottom left corner. But it was not to be for Taiwan as Vietnam scored the winner in the 55th minute with a powerful shot from 7 yards. The defeat came as many of Taiwan's most experienced players were sidelined after testing positive for COVID-19. But according to Taiwan's head coach Kazuo Ichigo, it was also an opportunity for younger players to gain some valuable experience. In the final, China beat South Korea, winning the Women's Asian Cup for a record 9th time. Despite the heartbreak, there is still hope for Taiwan's World Cup dream. They now move to a 10-team Interconfederation playoff tournament in 2023. It is a chance to secure one of the final 3 spots for the World Cup, co-hosted by Australia and New Zealand next summer. Rick E. and Sandy Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Lunar New Year in Taiwan is especially busy, a busy time for the country's fortune tellers. Here, people are eager to know what is in store for the coming year, whether it's in their careers, love lives, or even geopolitics. And as Rick Glauert reports, there are plenty of ways to get a peek into the future.
Zhang Bola is one of Taiwan's most famous fortune tellers, and this is when he is busiest, in the run-up to the Lunar New Year, which begins on February the 1st. Using babwei or moon blocks, and chouqian or drawing straws, he helps clients consult the deities on whatever's troubling them. With the pandemic and its threat to everyday life, there's plenty on everyone's minds.
那一般的台湾的小吃应该慢慢会复苏。如果从卦象来看，代表明年农历的8月，疫情会减低。那疫情减低之后，就可能台湾的经济就会复苏。
It's not just the deities being consulted by anxious Taiwanese. Lu Mengzong has seen an uptick in visitors keen for an interpretation of his tarot cards.
这张牌是女生，所以女生代表是皇后，皇后代表我们的台湾的这个总统刚好是蔡英文，她就是女皇，所以虎年还有民国111年、2022年全部旺的就是女生，就是她掌握了天时地利人和，好，因为她上面有拿着权杖嘛，所以以我整个来看台湾的国运不会很差，反而我给今年打个分数，我觉得会高达有85%。
So, Tarot Master Lu says things are looking up for Taiwan. But astrologist Chen Yuli has seen some uncertainty in the stars.
In maybe before May, we might have some conflicts with China, and this could be happen after the Winter Olympics. But the impacts, I think the range will be small. But later, this will arouse attention from international partners. So we will get more support from internationally.
Although fortune telling may not be an exact science, after a particularly unpredictable year of the ox, many in Taiwan are looking for some guidance and reassurance for the year ahead. Karma Xu, Rick Glauert and Irene Wu for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, pick a number. We look at what's behind Taiwan's Lunar New Year lottery craze. Stay with us after the break.
Thanks for watching Taiwan Plus. For more great stories from here in Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app.
Welcome back. You're watching Taiwan Plus News. Let's take a look now at some of the stories making the headlines around the world. The first members of a contingent of US soldiers have arrived in Poland as NATO prepares for a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine. Some 1,700 paratroopers from the US Army's Airborne Division will be based in the southeast of Poland near the border with Ukraine. Poland already hosts 4,500 US troops on rotation. Another 300 paratroopers are being sent from the US to Germany, from where an additional 1,000 soldiers will be posted to Romania's Ukraine border. Russia has amassed more than 100,000 troops near Ukraine's borders, raising fears that an invasion is imminent. Washington has reiterated that its troops will be supporting NATO countries and not defending Ukraine. A confidential UN report has revealed that cyber attacks originating from North Korea have stolen millions of dollars worth of cryptocurrency and other digital assets over the past year, helping to fund the country's weapons programs. Countries in the region have voiced their concerns after North Korea carried out 9 separate missile tests in January. It was the largest number in a single month in the history of the country's missile program. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to meet with officials from Japan and South Korea in Hawaii later this week to discuss regional peace and security. In the United States, hundreds of protesters took to the streets of Minneapolis in Minnesota. The protests are over the death of Amir, Locke, a 22-year-old black man who was killed by police last Wednesday. Officers were executing a so-called no-knock warrant, which allows them to enter a private home unannounced. Locke was not named in the warrant and is not believed to be related to the police investigation. Minneapolis is the same city where George Floyd was killed by police in May of 2020, which sparked the Black Lives Matter movement. Protesters want no-knock warrants to be banned, and some are calling for the resignation of the city's mayor and chief of police. Locke's mother is demanding the prosecution of the officer who killed her son.
At the end of the day, I believe that he was executed by the MPD, and I want the police officer that murdered my son to be prosecuted and fired.
A year since seizing power, Myanmar's military leaders are extending the state of emergency by 6 months. They still have the country's elected leaders behind bars, but armed opposition against the junta is rising.
1 year ago, the night before Papa Ham was meant to take her seat in Myanmar's parliament, she was taken from her home by soldiers. She was just one of dozens of elected leaders arrested during the coup, including democracy icon Aung San Suu Kyi, who is again behind bars facing years in prison. With the junta in power, declaring a year-long state of emergency, freedom has all but disappeared in Myanmar.
They are known for their barbarism against the political dissident. So they use every single possible way to threat the political dissidents.
Initially, there were large-scale demonstrations against the military takeover, but they were violently put down. So residents have taken to voicing their opposition with flash mob-style protests or silent strikes, which leave the streets deserted. In rural areas, armed militias have been fighting with junta troops. The conflicts have displaced hundreds of thousands.
Now, countless people are suffering from devastating socioeconomic challenges and humanitarian hardships.
Despite Western nations sanctioning Myanmar's top military leaders, the Regional Association of Southeast Asian Nations has not denounced the generals. A year on, the military leaders extended the state of emergency in a bid to justify their rule. But the people of Myanmar say the coup has failed and that the generals do not have control over the country. They are simply waging a war with its people. Rick Yi and Rick Lowett for TaiwanPlus.
Now here in Taiwan, writing spring couplets is a Lunar New Year tradition. Philip Brassard has this story of experienced calligraphers sharing their art to bring blessings to their community.
A common sight during the Lunar New Year are spring couplets like this one, adorning the doorways of homes and shops. They're meant to bring good fortune for the new year. And every year, 2 elderly calligraphers use their talent to bring prosperity to the people of Taichung City's Gongming village.
英语他也可以会写英语啊，我们那个国字他写得更漂亮。
88-year-old Wang Shuming's skills have been honed through many years of practice, going as far back as the mid-1900s, when he worked for the U.S. military.
那时候铅笔也没有，圆珠笔没有，钢笔也没有啊。在美军做简报，做什么都写。
Retired pharmacist Lu Xianzhong has had an interest in calligraphy since he was young.
初中联考都是用书法，作文都要写毛笔的，所以那时候就有一个底子。
The people of Gongming village are invited to take the spring couplets home with them, ensuring that with these gifts from Wang and Lu, the Year of the Tiger gets off to a beautiful start. Asnaya Zhou and Philip Brassard for TaiwanPlus.
People spilling out of lottery shops is a common sight in Taiwan over the Lunar New Year period. You can win huge cash prizes and even sports cars. But there's more behind every ticket bought. James Chater takes a look at this uniquely Taiwanese phenomenon.
Red envelopes stuffed with money are an essential part of holiday traditions in Taiwan. But for a lucky few, opening one of these at Lunar New Year might be a little more life-changing.
过年期间啊，一定要记得买大乐透跟2000元的超级红包，千万不能错过哦。
Every year, people across Taiwan flock to lottery shops, hoping they might win big on the New Year jackpot. The top prize this year is 880 million Taiwan dollars, or just over 30 million US dollars.
这段时间，这个大部分都是亲人团聚，或者是说很久不见的亲戚朋友，大家会聚在一起聊聊天，讲讲话，或者是玩一些这个游戏。那台湾除了麻将以外，目前在春节以前最好的那就是这个公益彩券。
Over the years, Taiwan's New Year jackpot has become an annual craze. In the run-up to the draw, rumours often circulate on social media about which shops offer the best chance of winning.
我过年有刮刮乐刮过，就是最多中过5000啊，对，大概500中5000这样。
Lottery shops will do everything they can to attract customers.
春节期间，大家都会想要来逛夜市，去阳明山、去士林官邸走春嘛，对不对？晚上顺便的时候会来士林夜市这边，经过我们店的时候，因为我们店就是装潢比较特别嘛，对不对？所以很多民众都会经过的时候都会很好奇，说：哎，这一间到底在干嘛？为什么会这么多人在低着头在那边刮刮乐？
But after you look inside this store, open 24 hours a day, the answer becomes obvious. As families across Taiwan gather for New Year's celebrations, many will be coming to shops like this, hoping they get lucky in one of Taiwan's lottery games. But this store in Taipei's Shilin district is particularly special. On one side of the room, you can check the computers to see if you've won big, and on the other, you can get a foot massage whilst checking your New Year's scratch cards. But beyond winning big, Taiwan's lottery has a wider purpose.
过年的时候会推出比较大的刮刮乐跟比较优惠的活动，这样子过年可以试个手气，就算没有中也是做公益啊。
Funds raised from lottery ticket purchases go to supporting social welfare, including contributing to pensions and health insurance.
从96年开始经营到110年，总共给了政府3988亿的公益盈余。 所以这个50%就是用在社会福利。我们以4000亿来算的话，等于就是将近2000亿要用在社会福利，45国民年金，5000民健保。所以台湾很多都是受到公益彩券这样的一个产业照顾。
And it's that combination of festive fun and doing something for society that gets people playing the odds every year.
一些红红的东西有没有？都会布置这种红红的东西，所以民众会觉得就是说很有喜气，很讨发财，所以大家都想要发个财这样。啊，过年就是想要趁这种过年，就是看可不可以中个头奖，好过年这样子。
When the lottery is drawn over New Year, ticket holders will be hoping they too will be left with a smile on their face. Alex Chen and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
Thanks for watching Taiwan Plus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Finally, today we leave you with pictures of Europe's largest light festival opening in Copenhagen. For more stories from Taiwan around the world, please download the Taiwan Plus app. Stay safe and see you next time.